Hello everybody, Infinite Shinjo here. Welcome to today's episode, and today we are going to be covering Ash's Kalos and Alola team remade. But before I get into this episode, I want to know, do you guys want me to do other videos like this? I already have one lined up where I remake Ash's Traveling Companions teams, but I want to know, would you like to see one for Ash's Rivals? I think that's the next biggest group that I could include. The only thing is, if I do Ash's Rivals, then I'd have to look on some reliable source like Bulbapedia, Cerebi, something like that that actually classifies whether a trainer is Ash's rival or not. And again, it all depends on if there's support from you guys for me to make one for Ash's Rivals. I'm already planning on doing one for Companions. I'm going to record it right after this one. But without any further ado, let's get into Kalos. Ash's Kalos team is the most infamous one, I feel, being Greninja, Ash Greninja, Talonflame, Hawlucha, Noivern, and Goodra. So here is how I remade the team. I didn't really remake the team. So Greninja, Talonflame, Hawlucha, Goodra are all the same. The only one I took out is Noivern. Now I like the idea of Ash having a dragon type. Even though he has Goodra already, I like the idea of Ash actually getting dragon types. But at the same time, in Kalos, he already had two flying types with Talonflame and Hawlucha. So the fact that he had half of his team be flying in Kalos is kinda weird in my opinion. So I feel like the best fit for his team that isn't a flying type is Go-Goat. And that's mainly because most of the time he does have a fire, water, grass type in a region. Most of the time they're all starters, but there are some situations where they're not. So for example, in Kanto, Johto, and Unova, Ash had all three starters. So then in Hoenn, he had Trico, Torkoal, and Corphish for his Fire, Water, Grass core. And then in Sinnoh, he didn't get a water starter, so he had Buizel instead. Although at the same time, there's no concrete rule saying that Ash has to have a Fire, Water, and Grass type, because the next series after this, he doesn't get the original bird, and most times he does. It's not really a set in stone thing that Ash has to have stuff like this, especially in journeys where everything's just all up in the air. But I remember back when Kalos was new that people were talking about what's his last team member going to be. I think this was before he got Noivern, maybe? Or maybe it was before he got Goomy. It was one or the other that people were saying, well, he always has a grass type, and they were torn between Go-Goat and Trevenant. Now Trevenant, I could actually see at the same time. It's a little bit more of a wilder choice in my opinion, but I can see it. But I decided to pick Go-Goat because of the whole emphasis on riding around on a Go-Goat and a Skidoo in the Kalos region, so I feel like that just makes sense. Although Ash's Kalos team is pretty solid already, so it's not like I needed to make many changes. The only thing I would say, and this isn't really a team change, more of a storyline change, I think it would have been better to give Hawlucha and Goodra more battling screen time. Now granted, Ash did send Goodra to the wetlands for a while, but still give it some more on-screen battles. And Hawlucha, well, to be fair, not just Hawlucha, his whole team essentially got shafted for Greninja near the end. But yeah, this is probably one of the first times that I can't really add much commentary to a team, because in all honesty, the team is pretty flawless. So instead, let's go to Ash's Alola team. And Ash's Alola team is Rowlet, Incineroar, Lycanroc Dusk, Melmetal, and Naganadel. That is certainly a wild team to say the least. So, here is what I did with Ash's Alola team. So, to start, I kept Incineroar and Lycanroc. Only thing I would change with Incineroar is have it evolve earlier on to actually show it having battles as an Incineroar. And then as far as Ash's Rowlet, I took out the whole dumb plot line of Ash's Rowlet ate an Everstone, so it can't evolve now. Because, like Ash to Trip with Snivy to Superior, I like the idea of Ash having a rival with How, and then both of them having a Rowlet line, and they both gradually evolve up. And since How does have Decidueye, I feel like it would be nice for Ash to have Dartrix, and it would make more sense for Ash to defeat it with a Dartrix because it's a flying type and Decidueye is only Grass Ghost, so the type advantage is there in Dartrix's favor. But let's go on to the other two mons. So, Passimian. If you watch the dub of Sun and Moon, this whole thing is going to be lost on you. But if you watch the original version, then you might know where I'm going with this. There was an episode in Sun and Moon where Passimian debuts, they're having like a soccer match, and Ash decides to dress up like a Passimian to blend in and show them camaraderie and teamwork and all that stuff. This episode wasn't shown in the dub. If you want to know why, you have to look that up for yourself. I'm not going to explain it right here. But before that episode was confirmed not to be dubbed, I thought very seriously that Ash was going to get Passimian. They were building it up, right? They had a Passimian that was called Tiny. It was much different than the other ones. Ash palled around with them, showed them teamwork, and then at the end of the episode, Ash gets Passimian. But he didn't do that. Although this is bringing up my terrible YouTube past that I made a video about Ash getting a Passimian because a Passimian was shown in the opening. Kind of a little cringe on my part that I did that even though it didn't happen anyway. But hey, I still stand by that Ash should get a Passimian. It just makes perfect sense in my opinion. Like I mentioned with Ash's Darmanitan in the last video, it just looks like an Ash mod. But then we move over to the Alolan Sandslash. Then that is where things get a little bit more controversial, I guess to put it, to talk about. I can't think of a better word to describe it. But here's my thought process. In Alola, he had so many traveling companions. He has Lily, Mallow, Lana, Lily, Sophocles, and Kiawe. And since there are so many of Ash's traveling companions, if you can even call them traveling companions, but I just feel like it would have made perfect sense to give each one of his friends an Alolan form. A lot of them already had one anyway, so it wasn't that difficult to come up with. And by a lot, I mean two. So I was looking at the Alolan forms list, trying to come up with a mon that I could include. And out of the group, I just feel like Alolan Sandslash makes the most sense. Because the only other one I can make a case for is Alolan Muck, but that's just kind of odd since Ash already has an irregular Muck. But the Alolan Sandslash works as a nice parallel to Lily's Alolan Vulpix, because they are essentially two sides of the same coin, both Gen 1 mons that evolve to Ice type that evolve with an Ice Stone. If you really wanted to, you could have the Ice Stone that Lily gets in Sun and Moon, she'd give it to Ash to evolve his Sandshrew. I wouldn't prefer that because that would break my heart, but you'll have to figure out that part in the next episode where I talk about his traveling companions. Honestly, I just like the idea of Ash with an Alolan Sandslash. I wanted to give him an Alolamon, and I feel like out of all the Alolan forms they have, this one makes the most sense. The only other one I could make a case for maybe is Alolan Raticate, but that's just kind of weird because it doesn't look like a mon that Ash would have. With the exception of a few times, he doesn't use slower mons as far as speeds go. That is my Alolan team. And honestly, out of the Kalos and Alola teams, even though I didn't make many changes to Kalos, it was a lot harder to come up with because both regions have such a smaller decks compared to other ones that I've had to work with. So it was more challenging, but let me know what you think about it. If you enjoyed, hit that like button. Let me know what you would think about Ash's teams. And I think even if I would keep Ash's Kalos team the same, I would just say give his other mons development. I kind of hinted at it before, but just like his whole Kalos team kind of suffered because Greninja took most of the spotlight. That is it for this video. Look forward to Ash's traveling companions later down the road, and I'll see you then. Momentai.